Good morning. Yeah, so it's a real pleasure to be here in this conversation about AI and elections. It's actually the second regional conference. We had one in March here, and I remember even Bina was in that conference organized by Yaga Africa. And so it basically shows that this is something that the whole world is grappling with, not just Africa, about AI and its implications on elections. You know, from yesterday, actually, some of the things actually that we are grappling with in this session, they were actually discussed yesterday relating to regulatory frameworks. And I remember Victor Shirley also presented about the social media guidelines, the booklet that you just showed. But I want to just stretch our conversation about its implications for democratic governance with practical experiences of what we are seeing on the continent of Africa. And with my little experience in elections, what we've realized up to date is that if, for instance, let me just use an example with Magdalena, who we've worked together many years, since around 2010. If in our working relationship we don't trust each other, it is not technology that is going to reinforce the trust. In other words, trust is relational and it is structural. And so what we are seeing on the continent of Africa is that if you don't trust an electoral commission, whether they invest $1 billion in trying to reinforce trust through technology, through AI, they can do whatever they want, but it's not going to bear any fruit so long as you're already in priority dealing with a structural problem. And so it is not AI that is going to reinforce that trust. So what AI is actually doing, it is convoluting the structural relationships that exist in the arena of elections. And that's what we've seen even in the US elections. In the 2016, in the recent elections, and so on, how AI was deployed through deepfakes and so on, but it reflects the society. And so the experience we are seeing on the continent of Africa, even for EMBs, electoral commissions which have deployed AI through, chatbots and to educate voters, AI in all the different ways of voter engagement and so on. So long as that electoral commission is not trusted, it won't bear much. And I want to give a practical example. This year alone, we've seen several democratic transitions in Africa, because this is what we call the super election year. But for Africa, actually, it's not a super election year, because the continent holds the most number of elections than any other continent. Now, quality is a different thing altogether. We had democratic elections in Senegal. This is just an example. There was all this fake news, candidates doing all this kind of stuff that we hear about. But do you know that in Senegal, it is the Ministry of Interior that organizes elections? It's not an independent electoral commission. Their model is different. It's not like the South African model. It's not like the Kenyan model. But we saw a peaceful and democratic political transition where the opposition took over, right? Senegal has a history of organizing democratic elections because of the integrity of the people who organize those elections. So you can have what we call, and this is what we are, just earlier on we are having a conversation with Judge and others about the institutional independence of an EMB. But also it boils down to personal integrity. Now, that is a case of a model of an electoral commission organizing elections in a context where there is AI which is being deployed, the deepfakes and so on, but people still trusted the Ministry of Interior. And there was a peaceful transfer of power. Now, another example is South Africa, where, as Victor was presenting yesterday, we had all these deepfakes, you know, fake news all over, maligning the chairperson, maligning all these electoral officials and so on. But it has a history of professionalism. It's one of the most trusted institutions. And that's what saved the Electoral Commission at the end of the day. They deployed AI in voter information, you know, if a registered voters want to check his details, you just go into the system, there's AI powered. But that's not what saved the IEC. And so we are seeing this kind of different models of Electoral Commission operating with different AI is still being deployed, but it boils down to that. Now, I want to take you to a case that now we're dealing right now with in Mozambique. Mozambique had general elections on 9th of October. Up to today, Mozambique is in a serious political crisis. Elections are being contested. In fact, the time that when the Electoral Commission was announcing provisional results. So in their jurisdiction, the Electoral Commission does not announce final results. It is provisional, and then it is the Constitutional Council which declares the final results. So that is a Lusophone legal system. And the Electoral Commission was divided in the results. When the chairperson was announcing the result, half of the Electoral Commission disassociated themselves with the result. And this has been historical. It's not just a case of 2024. In 2019, it was the case. In 2014, I remember we were together with Victor in those elections. It was the same case. So we have a history of an Electoral Commission which is permanently divided. And it's a model of that Electoral Commission. And we had disinformation and misinformation around the elections, but a priori the Electoral Commission was already divided. And so right now the country is dealing with serious crisis about post-electoral standoff about the results. Now we are also seeing fake results out there, you know, because we are in the context of where people, you know, use AI to, you know, to create their own results, and they almost look like, you know, the true results forms and so on. But the Electoral Commission is already dealing with a crisis. And so if an Electoral Commission is already divided, how do you expect an ordinary citizen, even in good faith, to trust that Electoral Commission? And so I'm giving you these three different models of EMBs operating with the same challenges that we face on AI, and how it is deployed. One of the things that we are dealing with, we've deployed at UNDP, is what we call iVerify and eMonitor. They help election management bodies first to track fake news, disinformation and misinformation, but also to help to detect those and also distribute, and also help the public to know that whether this information was true or false and so on, so that they can undertake the decisions. But one of the things also that we are getting to know is that, you know, because of the problem of internet penetration and how information travels, is that so fast information can be in the internet around an electoral process, and then a community radio picks it up. Now it's no longer now just circulating in the internet. A community radio, so where you have problems of AI, the penetration, you have a community radio which has taken up and communicates that in vernacular, in local languages. I think we have community radios even in Kenya. So I just want to show you the trends on how that even disinformation, misinformation travels. It doesn't just remain in the virtual space. So there is that information. And so when we deal with the iVerify and eMonitor to fight this kind of disinformation and misinformation. We also have to have strategic partnership with community radios so that they are also able to convey that same information. So it doesn't just remain in X, TikTok, and so on, because not everyone, even in the rural areas, uses this. And so you can see how we are bringing this kind of strategic partnerships in the democratic space to tame the influence of disinformation and misinformation. Now, one of the things what we've seen is that there has been, on the continent of Africa, is that with AI and different digital media, is that there's also been an increase in gender-based violence at the virtual space. And this is a trend we are seeing. And so approaches to tackling the impact of AI, especially the negative side, also need to bear into consideration that. And actually this booklet deals with that. The social media guidelines, they also look at the gender dimensions, because it's very critical. We saw it even in the US election. So it's not something unique to the continent of Africa. Now, what we've seen, and this is also a distinction we need to make. Okay, AI is an aspect of technology, like we saw it being deployed in Nigeria elections. Now, there is also another aspect of technology that was being deployed, for instance, in results transmission, right, in Nigeria elections. And I want us to get clearly this distinction. So you've had the successful side where AI was deployed in voter engagement in Nigeria, but you also had the technology of transmission of results which failed in Nigeria. We just basically had blackout after election day. And that had a significant impact on how people perceive the electoral outcome. So you can see how technology in itself, and it basically countered the investment that Nigeria had made on AI. And so all these things need to go together. Now, the final aspect, which before Chair, I pass to you the mic, is that we can see, because AI, even though it has its positive side, it also has its negative side. It's driving the cost of elections, right? Because we are permanently dealing with the question of distrust, and we are always investing more in technology, which has an impact in the budget of elections. And none of the countries in Africa which is investing in technology really operates on budget surplus. We don't. It's not free money out there in the exchequer that we use to invest. In fact, most of our budgets in elections, we are usually actually operating on budget deficits. And so, for a country that is investing $500 million because of elections technology, in terms of trying to secure trust, but at the same time, that trust is always being undermined. So how do we look at the future of elections and the future of the cost of elections within the context of AI and also other technological tools that we are deploying? And I think this is a critical conversation, because most of our economies are not doing well. Post-COVID economies in Africa are still struggling right now. And so I want to bring these perspectives in the conversation as we look into the future of AI in elections, but also the future of technology itself in elections in Africa. Let me stop there. Thank you so much. Over.
Yes, let's clap again for Robert for that wonderful presentation. Before we go to our discussants, just to do a small recap of what Robert has discussed. Issues around trust. And Robert says that at the core of deployment of artificial